That's close enough.
In order.
To the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
First thing we're going to do is open the public hearing on local law number 4, 2019. Martha, you can go ahead and read it.
Local law number 4 of the year 2019, a local law amending the zoning law of the town of Cohocton, New York, and local law number 2 of 2006 to regulate windmills and windmill facilities.
What we just found out,
I think it was just
yesterday
jury box.
afternoon that I found out, was
You can go in the
that,
jury box if you want.
was Ray, you were right.
Go ahead,
Apparently in
Paul,
the
no.
zoning law, there is a section that says that this has to go to the local planning board for their review and their recommendations to the board before the board can act on it. But the board does have to act on amending the law itself. It's got to be done by the town board. So we're going to open the public hearing tonight to get whatever comments we have, but we're probably going to recess that public hearing until the next board meeting to wait for the results from the planning board. So, anybody got anything to say for the amendment?
I do if nobody else does.
Go ahead.
The notice that was in the paper says that the law was introduced at the October 15th meeting. I was at that meeting, several other people in this room were at that meeting. When was the law introduced?
It's on his desk, I believe. Where you had it.
Where did it come from?
I typed it up. I prepared it.
And it was here for that meeting? Chip came to that meeting to ask for the law to be changed. So the law was already written before he came?
I'll tell you when.
I think he did an explanation for why they were requesting the change. Yeah, October 15th minutes. As I remember, we had to correct that, an increase of up to 650 feet.
But there was no law talked about by this board at that meeting.
Did they read the request?
No.
It says, with the exception of the October 8th meeting minutes. Martha, can you go grab them for us, would you please?
October 8th?
Yeah, October 8th. At least this is in your minutes for tonight to approve.
October 8th?
Yep.
I think it was actually.
Can I ask a question? Can somebody explain what the local law is going to do and what the benefits are gonna be for the town?
What the amendment to the local law does is to allow an increase in the height of the turbines from the existing height up to, and raising it up to 650 feet. And one of the reasons that we're acting on that is because that allows the turbines, the blades, to get above the tree line and increases the efficiency of the turbines, which means they make more megawatts. We get paid per megawatt.
It'll
Town does.
increase the amount that's coming back to the.
Right, because it decreases the turbulence of the blades.
Okay. So what's the benefit again for the town? What, are we gonna be getting more money because of this?
Yes,
Is that
because
what-
it increases the efficiency of the turbines themselves, so they make more megawatts, and we get paid per megawatt of output.
And is this all the turbines that are gonna be affected by this?
Chip
That's
is
hard to
here.
say because, it depends on the location of them, where they are, as far as what height they have to go to exceed the tree line. That'll all be done with their final designs, with the, each individual turbine height and everything of each, location.
John, what's the current height?
420 feet.
420?
Mm-hmm.
Where does that not exceed the tree line? I mean, you can see them from all over, and I don't see any trees blocking any of them.
It's the wind, the blade tips.
But even there.
Why should I be? I'll
Yeah,
let
so I'm happy to
the
address, sorry.
experts explain it.
Yeah, so I'm Chip Redling, I'm with Barron Wind. I think you'll find in those October 8th meeting notes during your town board public hearing for the budget is when the concept of the turbine change was introduced, right? I think that's what you're gonna see in the minutes. But as far as that, if you don't mind, I'll just kind of go through the questions you're likely going to ask, like, why do this? What's the design? What's in it for Cohocton? And what are the next steps, if that's okay? Yeah. So as far as I think the supervisor explained it, the introduction to that is Barron Winds was proposed as a 2020 project, 2020 online. The original heights of the turbines proposed were 494 feet. 494. So Barron Wind started developing the project sometime around 2008 and provided an application, an Article 10 application to the state of New York in November of 2017. And so along with that process, prior to the process, there's a lot of public involvement, there's public meetings, there's information sessions, information available. And then during the Article 10 process, which started formally and started with the application in November 17, started with the formal process in August of 2018, allows for the towns to become interveners within the project itself. So not only the towns, but also some individuals within towns and nearby towns within Barron were interveners and essentially had a seat at the table during the permit process. So their concerns were shared, their concerns were, many of them integrated into the project, excuse me, in the design itself. So what's happened is we've got the process is completed and we received our Article 10 certificate for September 12th of 2019. And Barron Winds is the third project in the state of New York to receive an Article 10 project. The first of which was also another project owned by our company. So since we've just received this, we know now that a 2020 online date is infeasible, that we're simply not going to get there, part of which is continuing permit processes that we need to go through. Part of it are conditions associated with the Article 10 that need to be met. These include things like submitting complete building design drawings. These include things like emergency preparedness plans that need to be discussed with the towns and finalized, and some other provisions. There's around 130 or so conditions that need to be met. So we're not gonna make it, which means that the project then moves out to an online date of 2021. So if we're moving to 2021, we have an opportunity to do some retooling of the project for a couple of reasons. One is, I think many of you are aware, there's been discussion around what's called a production tax credit. So as we move beyond 2020, that production tax credit decreases. Eventually it goes to zero in a few years. And this means that the project economics, they were always on the fence. We mentioned this in the Article 10, we discussed this, that they were on the fence, but it pushes it even farther. When it goes into essentially towards the negative. And so we needed to look at other ways to make this project viable, to continue the investment, working with the communities to bring the project to these towns. So, as the supervisor mentioned, one of the ways we do that is we raise the turbine heights above the tree lines. Where right now the turbine tips are, say, 30 feet or so above the tree line tips. We need to move them farther to eliminate turbulence associated with that tree canopy. So we've done a number of studies. We've done what's called LiDAR. We use a laser radar to determine the tree heights, so we know we've got the data, and we know now the height that we want to achieve for the project. They're not all going to be, you know, up to 650 feet. There'll be others that are still at the 500-foot level. They may go slightly above that, but there'll be a couple different heights. The final design's being worked out, and you'll see the final design will be within the amendments for the Article 10, expected to be filed in January of 2020, January 2020. Just a couple. So what's the new design? You know, it's new technology that we would introduce to the project. If you're in a meeting, one of the town board meetings, I think 2 months ago, a recent pamphlet was introduced. I can't remember the name of the magazine. But, yeah.
Town topics.
Yeah, town, okay. That actually commented on exactly this situation, where the turbines within the state and the developers are looking for taller turbines. Again, larger generator, less turbines within a community, but with a larger generator, there's benefits which I'll get into in just a minute. As far as any redesign, in the new design, all that redesign, I mentioned going through Article 10 process again, interveners can become re-involved. Also, that the new design would meet all of the stipulations and requirements of the Article 10. So that main thing people ask about is noise, shadow flicker, these types of things would all be met within the, would meet the Article 10 requirements. And then the other thing I wanted to quickly touch on, and I'm happy to answer questions if allowed, would be what's in it for Cohocton, right? What's in it for the town? I mentioned before, more megawatts, it would be less turbines. That's the expectation today as we complete the analysis. The town of Cohocton's paid on a nameplate capacity, which means whatever the generator is, there's a calculation that's multiplied in order to determine the payment to the town. What's been commented before in other towns, I think this is a very key point, regardless of whether the turbines turn or don't turn, the town still gets paid that amount, right? It's an obligation, requirement, and an agreement between the town itself and the Barren Winds project. The other thing I'd mention is there's a payment in lieu of tax agreement that's been negotiated with the Industrial Development Agency for Steuben County. This same process the town of Cohocton went through some 10 years ago, right? And I think you guys have seen there's been some benefits from that. There's also been some hardships, I think, with some recently or some announced tax increases in order to make up gaps between tax decreases, and pilot payment revenue paid to the town. So now that table has turned for Cohocton, and you've seen broad tax increases throughout the town. The new pilot agreements, as the one that would be signed with Steuben County and with Barren Winds, is being readjusted to address this. So within the new pilot agreement, if the town lowers its taxes, if that's what the town decides to do, there is no penalty associated with the pilot payment, because the pilot payment from the start is fixed, and then it goes up, it escalates over time at a 2% rate. So we've commented before within the town board meetings, and I think there's certainly recognition of the upside to the town. As far as trying to quantify that, we're still in the analysis phase, so there's it's not an exact amount yet, but our estimation as we sit here today that the host community agreement would pay approximately $250,000 per year into the town of Cohocton. That's just the host community agreement. In addition, the pilot agreement, right, the payment in lieu of tax agreement with Steuben County IDA would pay approximately $100,000 per year into the town of Cohocton. So in total, it's $350K into the town year over year. It escalates, has an escalation built in during the life of the pilot, which is 20 years. So hopefully that addresses a few of the questions that might be asked.
Did the wind company get sold? Because it was terraform.
Nope, it was
This is a different one.
different, that's a different project, so.
You're still working on Dutch Hill though, right?
It's not us, different project, yeah,
That'll
different
be
project.
discussed later on in the meeting
Yeah.
tonight.
Yes, this is Baron Wentz.
This is completely new. When
Well, regardless where you put your wind towers, I live directly across from two of them on the drum property. And I'll tell you what, there's one big problem, and that's shadow flicker. If any of you at all want to see what shadow flicker's like, come to Dutch Hill when the sun's setting. And I'll tell you what, I was out working one night and I literally got sick on my stomach and threw up because of the shadow flicker. Shadow flicker is horrible. And if you don't believe it, like I said, come see for yourself. It's terrible. Regardless where you put them, if you put the wind towers to the west of your house, you're gonna get shadow flicker. I argued it since 2006 and 7. There's gotta be a clause put in for whether it's Dutch Hill or wherever you live, there's gotta be a clause put in that them things are shut down at sunset, before sunset, or you're gonna get flat shadow flicker. And like I said, it's not nice.
Will the setbacks change?
They won't. Well, okay, the setbacks are a function of the tip height. So yes, so we've had to, in our initial siting, we've got to move turbines, away from roads, away from certain overhead power lines, away from residences, as a function of the tip height. So the answer
the
is,
ratio for the setbacks doesn't change.
yeah.
If you're putting them
What
625
what
feet
does
in the air,
ratio for the setbacks mean? Are we
1.5
talking
times the
tower?
height.
No, it's 100 foot plus.
the higher you put them in the air, the sooner you're gonna get shadow flicker.
That was 1.5. 100 foot plus.
The 100 foot greater than the overall height of the turbine is a setback from non-participating property lines.
Run that by me one more time?
So you take the height of the turbine, add 100 foot, and that's your side setback for non-participating property lines and roads.
But it's a straight 1,500 feet to an existing residence.
That's
which
from the center of the
that's-
turbine.
You're talking 200 feet.
Well, it's
closer.
the turbine, the blades is part of the turbine, right? You can take the blades off, you don't have nothing.
I'm just telling you how the law is written.
The law was written that way, then that needs to be changed because of the fact that if your blade size increases
That
and your
includes the blade height.
generator, if your generator increases, I'm 1,500 feet. You know how close I am. And you know how close Judy is. So all that has to be, you might have to move some bases. Chip, is there precedent for other community wind laws that have 650-foot structure heights and the other impacts on the interrelated factors like setback? As we know, the original law, the setback to a dwelling in particular was based on a general rule of thumb, 3 times the structure height, and that's not being addressed in this proposed law modification.
Yeah, so I just can't recall off the top of my head the calculation for, you said.
There is no calculation. It's 1,500 foot from the center of a turbine
To the
to a
property.
non-participating dwelling.
That was the original law.
No,
Yeah.
it's based on a 500 foot turbine.
Yeah, that was based on a 420-foot turbine. And that was 10 years ago. Things changed in 10 years.
If it's a flat rate, I mean, I'd be curious to determine or research how many turbines have fallen on homes in the state of New York, right?
Well, I think the main concern is blade fragment throw in the event of a blade shear. That general rule of thumb of 3 times was set intentionally for the purpose of protecting the safety of the public in the event if a fragment is thrown.
since that general rule of thumb, there's been more scientific approaches that prove